Welcome back to Newsmaker Live. I'm Clinton Reynolds. I'm joined by Alan Chastanet, former Tourism Minister, Tourism and Civil Aviation Minister. We'll be taking your calls, so that number on the screen right now, which will be up in the next 5 seconds or so, you can dial that number to be part of our discussion. And before we go to our phone lines, I want you to listen to the next clip, especially the former Communications and Works Minister, Guy Joseph. So let's listen to Guy Joseph, and I think it's Leonard Montoute as well.
Minister of Infrastructure must come and tell us whether it is just road markings and signs that is his responsibility as minister, and whether these things they criticize in opposition are not necessary to be done.
All right, that was former Communications and Works Minister Guy Joseph, and he criticized the infrastructure minister. In your estimation, was that criticism fair?
Well, I don't think he was criticizing. I think he was just pointing out the fact that here we are. They've been in office for a year. They were very critical of how quickly we were able to move on certain projects. You take Crestlands. They just broke ground on the Crestlands Bridge up in Soufrière. Okay? That was a project, the financing was already sourced, and it's taken them over a year to get implemented. I understand that the bid was originally rejected and they had to go back out to bid again. But there's been no new projects. All the projects that are being undertaken right now, other than the cosmetic works that he's talking about, were already started by us.
I think we have a call on the line. Let's go to the phone lines. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Alan, some of the things you say, I listen, some of them are true. Some of them ambiguities. Big question for you. Why do you think the United Workers' Party and yourself lost your seat and lost the elections in total? Just in brief, why do you think they do? And I hope that can be a tagline for the night. Why is it that St. Lucia rejected everything that you all have done?
All right, thank you very much.
You know, I'm not even going to answer the caller, because we came here to discuss policy. If you want to get into the past is the past. I've already answered that question with you as to what I think happened. If the caller said that there's some things that are ambiguous about what? Say it. Tell me what you think is ambiguous, and I'll be happy to be able to clarify. But I'm not going to get into this traditional political nonsense. We have a country, whether you've realized it or recognized it yet, there are people losing their job. There are people who are having difficulty in sending their children to school. There are people who are not going to have a good Christmas because they're concerned about what next year is going to bring for them. I think that we need to be collectively talking about these things in a mature way and finding the best solution to move forward, way forward for St. Lucia. We as a party have come forward and presented in a press conference some of the issues that we think that need addressing, i.e. VAT on medicine. Clearly that's something within the government's mandate. We're not the only ones calling for it. Why is it taking so long? The only 2 times that we've seen the government change its mind on something, one was with the cruise lines. We know that the cruise lines threatened to pull out of St. Lucia. They told the Prime Minister clearly they were not going to pay the VAT. He waited. He then now had a special parliamentary meeting where he exempted now the tourists from having to pay VAT. But he didn't change anything else. We brought up the medicine at that point. He has not addressed it. So let us talk about policy. Let's talk about things that we can do to rectify the situation collectively. The opposition has said, if you do certain things, we're not going to criticize. We're going to support the government in power in being able to move forward. It's not that everything the government puts forward that we're going to reject, but right now we think that the government's strategy of fighting the private sector, not inducing investment, not making us more competitive, and not looking at the impact of that and some of the other taxes on these sectors is wrong, and we're asking them to review it.
No, the issue, and we've been hearing, just hold on first 1 second. We've been hearing this argument about VAT on medication. However, the overall increase on medication is 5% because people had been paying the 10% consumption tax on medication. And this is overlooked, and I think, some people sometimes conveniently try to mislead the public when you talk about VAT on medication. I was listening to Mary Francis this week as well, And you know, she was very adamant that VAT should be removed from medication. However, she would not entertain someone who was making the point that we paid before VAT on, or consumption tax on medication. Let me just get that call, and then probably you can respond to that. Good evening, caller. Thanks for holding. Oh, we lost that caller.
I think that there's been increase in taxes on some of the other items, and you may be 100% right. But I think that right now there is a perception and there is a carryover, because you're paying right now the VAT on the consumption tax until the products are replenished. We don't know how long it's going to take. So why not just temporarily take off the VAT, say for the next 6 months, okay, and reintroduce it at a later date? That's something that he can be done in 2 twos. And I think that even if he made the announcement, and even though Parliament, it requires that he goes to Parliament for it, he gave the VAT free on the barrels prior to coming to Parliament. And I thought that the parliamentarians were incredibly mature in leaving that issue alone. They pointed it out, but didn't make an issue of it. And in fact, he even said it was one of the more civil parliamentary meetings that they had. Same thing applies here. I think if he came out tomorrow and said, I'm going to take the VAT off for the next 6 months, and when we go to the Parliament, with everybody's permission, we'll get that done. I don't think there'll be any fight.
We have another call on the line. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Alan, good night.
Good night.
I read the show. I just very clumsy all day. Mr. Chastanet, how much...
We're not hearing you very, very clearly.
Okay. Could you hear me now?
A little better.
I would like Mr. Chastanet. How much money did they pay American Airlines to fly to St. Lucia over the years?
We paid, in the first instance, $1 million, which was for the 3 flights a day out of New York.
And that's US dollars.
US dollars. And 4 flights a day out of Miami. And that lasted for about 2.5 years, if my memory serves right. And they ended up paying $1.5 million to American Eagle.
Okay. And then, did you know, but you try and bring in some other airlines and it failed.
Like what?
Either Caledonian or some airlines, and then for what?
I don't understand. I don't understand the point.
Red Jet or what are them? And they fail.
I didn't bring Red Jet in. Red Jet did its own investment. The government solution never put any money into Red Jet.
But you try and bring an airline after that, and it never came through.
CARICOM Airlines.
Okay.
But we never put any money into CARICOM Airlines.
Okay, all right. Okay. Cool.
That's it. All right, caller. Thanks a lot. Going back to that Guy Joseph clip, I mean, I have commended, the infrastructure minister on the work that he had done, because, visibly, you can see that things are happening. The battle for over a year after Hurricane Thomas, little was done to restore that stretch of road, and
really.
Well,
you just told me.
Driving on the road, it would appear that very little was done.
All the work that was done in clearing it, right?
Right. But in terms of restoring.
We were able to get money from CDB. The standards that CDB presented would have automatically disqualified a lot of the companies in St. Lucia from putting in a bid in. We argued with CDB that we felt it was unfair, that the St. Lucian contractors and truckers had taken on the riskier part of the job, that you could not disqualify them now from participating. We were able to get that finally through, of which now the projects have gone ahead.
When did that happen? How long after Hurricane Thomas?
Wow. I mean, we started negotiations with CDB. They had to come down and do a survey, reassess everything else. So I think that by the time we got the CDB okay on the project was probably around, again, I don't want to be committed to it, but I want to say maybe sometime like June or September.
Okay.
And then you have to go through the bidding process, and we delayed the bidding process because we were not happy with the qualifications that they had set out. We felt they were too high. So I think it only finally got finalized after we left. But in the meanwhile, and again, this is a fundamental difference between the United Workers' Party and the Labour Party. When we were faced with those crises, and we had to now have unbudgeted expenditure, we didn't just go and borrow money to do it. We went and reallocated monies in between. So for instance, Soufrière, the bridge, the famous bridge in Soufrière, was supposed to have been started in November after Thomas. and the money was reallocated to go to the Bar de Ile or to one of the other projects. Okay? So we learned to live within our budget. We made a commitment to the people of St. Lucia that we would not try to increase the debt to GDP, and that what we would do is we would try to grow the economy. I'm very proud of the fact that even after the revision of the 4.3%, and let's say that that's not necessarily wrong, that they revised up to 6 years prior, and realized now that during our entire tenure, it was economic growth. And as a result of it, the last year that we thought was 4.3% growth actually was less because we had more growth leading into that period. Okay? So I'm proud of the fact that the debt to GDP did not change substantially, that we were able to have positive economic growth in probably the worst of economic times. Look at the things that we faced. The worst financial crisis. Fuel prices went to $150 a barrel, and we kept the price at the pump the same $11 the entire time. Wheat prices, rice prices, all went and spiked. We absorbed that. We were talking about sometimes $60 million in a year. And we didn't just have the temptation to say we have a crisis and borrow extra money. We realized we had to be fiscally responsible. And I think that that hurt us, but at the same time, I think that that's how the country needs to be managed.
We have a call on the line. Good evening, caller. Thanks for holding. Hello?
Yes, good night.
Yes,
Good night.
please go ahead.
Good night to your guest, Mr. Chastanet.
Good night.
I want to wish you Merry Christmas in advance. And I want to tell you that black people not stupid, Mr. Chastanet. You had the opportunity to serve St. Lucia, and you did not make us proud. You squandered millions, Mr. Chastanet. You did nothing to improve on the tourism industry. So right now, just stay calm, chill yourself, try to remarket yourself, and if you want to go up next election, you will go up. But don't try to come there and mama guy St. Lucian. That's why you were rejected.
Thank you, caller. I allowed him to go ahead. You know, I mean, I don't believe in cutting people out, but then I know that you can defend yourself, so I'll allow you to respond to this comment.
You know, one thing I've learned in politics is you can't overreact. You know, the Prime Minister made some very derogatory remarks about me that were very libelous. And I decided I wasn't going that direction. I mean, we're in politics and you have to be accustomed to taking that. But what I would say to the caller is that while that may be his sentiment, the facts tell a very different story. That during my tenure, we achieved the greatest levels of tourism. We doubled the revenues that we had in tourism. We achieved heights and recognitions that we'd never achieved before. I'm very proud of a lot of the things we did, and I think that there are a lot more St. Lucians who felt the benefit of what we did. If you go and speak to the taxi drivers at Southern Taxi, if you go and speak to the cruise ship guys, I mean, we doubled the cruise ship arrivals from 350,000 to a peak of 700,000, and we were able to sustain that number for a long period of time. We saw new hotel investments coming in. We saw people getting jobs. I mean, so for me, the evidence is on the ground. And I just say thank you very much for your good wishes, and I wish you the same.
We have another call on the line. Good evening. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Mr. Chastanet.
Yes, sir.
I am totally in agreement with you about the Liat issue. I think we need to take out that ball from Antigua. I am in support with you on that one. But then, infrastructure, I think the guys have done well. So well within 1 year. Take the Balil, take the Bakatel Road, take the Dibawa Road, that's the area I live, in that Dibawa Road, you know, lightning from the Garon to Dibawa, that wall is built, you know, the marking of the road, which is so important, you know, the Bonte Bridge. So much has been done. If you could go and go and go within 1 year. So I don't think you've been fair, you know. Like I tell you, I totally agree on the Liat issue.
Well,
All right, thank you very much.
I appreciate your comments, and you know, one of the things I wanted to add, one of the things that disturbs me the most about Liat is how unconscionable it was, particularly to people who were going to get their visas, people who needed medical help. And you look at the price to go to Barbados. This is absurd. Okay, absurd. But to the point that the caller was making, I appreciate what he's saying. And I think that we were not criticizing. What we were saying is the projects that he's done are the projects that we already had in the pipeline. Financing was already in place. They found everything in place. They had made claims that we were not doing other things. None of those other things are being done. I mean, Guy Joseph pointed out a bridge in Mocha in which a gentleman died prior to the elections. And the Labour Party made a huge issue as to why the railings weren't there. Here we are almost a year and a half later, the railings are still not there.
But still, I mean, some of those infrastructural developments that we have right now, especially as it comes to, as it relates to our roads, are a little more than cosmetic, wouldn't you agree?
The ones that they have initiated themselves have been cosmetic. The ones that were left to them have not been. And I think that that's where we're making the separation.
Yeah,
I think, you know, fixing up the bridge in Mocha, is that more of a priority or less a priority than putting those barriers on the highway going up north? Okay, and in fact, where they've put the barriers by that corner by just past Villa Beach, okay, all the trucks are going over on the side of the road. So if you're going to do it properly. But I mean, I don't think that what we're criticizing is that those are the projects they found in place. What are the new projects? And then you're telling me that going to fix the Bonterre Bridge is a priority over some of the other areas?
We have another call on the line. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
What happened to Mr. Chastanet? What happened to Jamaica coming to St. Lucia? Jamaica, number one.
Can you repeat that again, sir?
I want to ask Mr. Chastanet,
yes.
What has happened to Jamaica? Wasn't he a worker at Jamaica some years ago?
Yes.
What happened to EC Express in his time? I want to know. Because, I mean, he been making some statements there about airlifts or whatnot, but he was with Jamaica some years ago, right? That's number one. I know he was a director or manager. Also, what happened to EC Express in his time? I want to know. Okay,
well, I don't know. Probably you might want to clarify in relation to what? What is the connection?
EC Express came to St. Lucia, I think, through Mr. Chastanet in his time. I think so. I mean, either as a director or something. But he will keep Air Jamaica. I would know what has happened to Air Jamaica. Tell me.
Okay.
I was the VP of Marketing at Air Jamaica. When I got involved in Air Jamaica, Mr. Stewart bought it. He bought it with 7 planes. By the time he left Air Jamaica, it had 22 planes. It had gone from $190 million in revenue to almost $800 million in revenue. Had created a major hub in Montego Bay. We had flights all the way throughout the Eastern Caribbean. I thought we did a phenomenal job. And what happened was the government of Jamaica, we were in Category 2, and a lot of debt had gathered up. The government of Jamaica had shares in Air Jamaica, and the government of Jamaica decided that they were going to sell Air Jamaica. They could not sustain the level of debt that Air Jamaica was in. EC Express was an attempt to create a hub. Originally it was going to be out of Barbados. We spoke to Prime Minister Anthony. We agreed to move EC Express here to St. Lucia. We did not want to use Dash 8s, but ECA, which is the Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority, did not have the capacity to license any other type of plane. So we came into the backyard. We had Biwi Express, Liat, Caribbean Star, and EC Express flying. I mean, if you remember those days, there were sometimes 4 planes on the ground leaving to Barbados at the same time. I think the airfare had made it down to something like $60 US per way per person. Nobody was making money. The difference was Mrs. Stewart, after losing $12 million in about 6 months, said he doesn't need to do this. Okay? Caribbean Star with Stanford, eventually with all his illegal money that we now know, he eventually said he's not going to do this anymore. And Biwi Express ended up becoming Caribbean Airlines. And then there was a fight between the governments with regards to Caribbean Airlines and Liat. That's why you've seen it take Caribbean Airlines so long to enter into the Eastern Caribbean. But I would say to you that my experience in those companies has taught me a lot about the aviation industry. I mean, I was intimately involved here with EC Express and negotiating with ECA, the landing fees, and seeing what the competition was and what the problems were, and seeing firsthand the Dash 8 couldn't make money on those short routes. So, I mean, I have firsthand experience with the things I'm telling you about, and I think that experience benefited me tremendously when I was the Minister of Civil Aviation.
Thanks for holding, caller. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Concerning Liat,
Yes.
actually I never thought I'd hear someone else say this regarding the overemployment rate of staff in Antigua. I've been saying that for quite some time. If my memory serves me right, Antigua was the biggest investor in Liat, and so Antigua looks at Liat as their own airline, although the slogan says the Caribbean airline. Until something is done about Antigua, Liat will never be profitable. And all investments, bailouts by the other Caribbean governments will just be sucked up in a matter of time. So something has to be done there. That is the only way Liat will ever be profitable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I agree with the caller, but I don't think it's the only thing. You know,
But
I think it's one of the critical things.
but don't the governments realize that?
I told you, governments did realize it, and that's why the governments have not put money in. The only reason people are having to put money back in now is because they're being held ransom. But as I said, if I was certainly in government right now, I would have designated Caribbean Airlines as my national carrier. I would get them to fly through Barbados to put competition on the Barbados route. I would get competition on the Antigua route and even to the Puerto Rico route with Caribbean Airlines. But Liat does not respond well to being a monopoly. It only responds well to being competition. But when they have competition, then they blame the competition for all their losses, rather than restructuring to become competitive.
We have another call. Good evening. Please go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I realize you have Mr. Chastanet defending a lot of the statements that I made. I want to congratulate Mr. Chastanet on a very good program and yourself as a very good host. But the key issue for me is usually what the media plays is just a snippet of what is said. I made a complete statement where I said particularly I was not criticizing the minister and saying that these works are not important. It was a measurement against what happened for 1 year after Hurricane Thomas and the criticisms we were under for not getting the bad lane going much faster than we did. And a lot of the key areas where I came out to explain that geotechnical studies had to be done. And we are seeing in the case of Geno, the road is still the same. I heard a caller mention Bacatel. Bacatel Road was almost opened before the election. It was just the paving that was left to be done in Bacatel. So to attribute that to the former government, 3 of the 4 walls being done in the Badling were issued by ourselves when I was minister to the persons, and these were not funded by CDB because we felt that CDB was delaying the process too long. So the government found its own resources so that we could commence work in the Badling because we understood that when the people traveling from the airport kept on going through, and the people from Virgin and British Airways had raised questions initially about why the Badlil was not being addressed, we had to move as a government to address it immediately. There is only one new wall which we had already identified the resources for, which has been started by this Labour government in the Badlil. And that's the first 2 slides that you are approaching on coming down the Badlil. The other 3 in the bottom, which are completed, were works actually commissioned by us during my time as minister. So I think statements must be taken in the context that it is made, rather than to just say this one thing. I am saying that most of what I've seen is cosmetic in terms of the new works. All the other things I'm seeing there are works that was in the pipeline or already in progress.
All right, thank you very much. And that was the former Communications and Works Minister, Guy Joseph, with that comment there, referring to himself as the minister, obviously. We have another call coming right through. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have a comment to make, but might be a question. If Mr. Chastanet is admitting that most of the work that has been done in the year that the Labour Party has been in office was things that they commissioned, who's to be blamed for the present situation of the country then? Because it's just their work that have been that is continuing. The government, when it's put its budget, we know it takes time for their policies to come into fruition. So whatever St. Lucia is facing, and even VAT being implemented, I dare say is the doing of the government that Mr. Chastanet was part of. So you can't have it both ways. If you're saying they have not done anything, you must also admit that whatever negative that the island is experiencing is as a direct result of bad governance by the United Workers' Party. Thank you.
Thank you. You care to comment?
Yeah, I beg to differ. First of all, I don't think that the statements that we said with regards to the roadworks can be carried through to everything else. And all I think that the minister was saying and I was saying was that the work that is being done was work that was already started. Okay? And that after receiving as much criticism as we did with regards to additional works, why those additional works have not started. That's one. Two, in terms of VAT, we were very clear. There was a white paper, and the way that VAT's been implemented has already gone against core parts of what the white paper recommended. We also said, if you read the statement very carefully, that we committed to going ahead with VAT, but at what level and how and when would be determined based on the economy. So right now, we can criticize the government for the policies it has. And maybe it's not even to say criticize, is to alert the government the direction they're going in right now is not a good one. Wait a second. We had a great relationship with the airlines. The Minister of Tourism came in and said that American Airlines was bankrupting the country. Why is it that American Eagle has left St. Lucia and has not left the majority of islands in the Caribbean? Why? He's alienated them. You come out and you say that the hoteliers are bandits, that they owe $35 million, and they don't want to cooperate with the government, when the Hotels Association sat down in private and explained to the government what the issues were. We've not seen this government embrace the private sector.
But it would be, I mean, it is strange, you know, to some that the same UWP, which said that it would have implemented VAT in April, is now coming back and criticizing the implementation of VAT. What would have been different if the UWP were in office as far as the implementation of VAT?
There was a tremendous amount of debate as to what the level would be. We'd not signed off on 15%. Okay? In fact, there was arguments put aside that we should not be touching the service sector, that we should only have maybe 8.5 or 9% on goods, not on services. On the service sector, it's a brand new tax. Right? And we felt that the tourism industry was too important at this point to interfere with it. And given the fragility of the economy, that we should leave it alone. That's clearly articulated there. But there were a lot of things. And then nobody would have known. We couldn't have anticipated where the economy would have been by April. All those things were taken into consideration. When VAT was being introduced in the majority of the other islands, their economies were on upswings. And there were major investment projects taking place to help overcome that. We're on a downswing now. Was it justifiable to go to 15%? We think it's debatable. And to say, if you read the statement, and I ask you to go back and read the statement, what it says we're committed to going with VAT. Sir John Compton made that statement in his opening budget speech when we first won. We know that we have to go with VAT. Why? Because we've signed trade agreements in which the duties on products coming from Europe and coming from CARICOM have to go to zero. Duties make up almost 70% of our revenue. So it means we must find an alternative source. And that's going to be happening over the next 6 years. Okay? So you have to introduce VAT. We've never argued that. All we're saying is, given where we are now, do you do that? So for instance, we had to make those very tough decisions with regards to fuel. When the fuel prices went up to $150, could we do a fuel price throughput at that point? The answer was no. Until we saw it stabilize, and even it was stabilizing at a higher number, it would stabilize. It was stabilizing between $80 and $100. That is when we introduced the throughput. And we did it over 1 month. When we had projects and programs, we stayed within the budget. And we tried not to increase the debt to GDP. We felt that those were important things. We did things to work with the private sector. We believe that the private sector are our engine of growth. That is where the growth needs to come. The difference is, when government creates jobs, it needs to find more tax money to pay for those jobs. Whereas when you can create jobs in the private sector, those jobs now start paying government back money. And government needs to focus on the basic infrastructure items.
We have a final call. Good evening. Thank you very much for holding. Hi, good evening.
Good night. Good evening to your guests.
Good evening.
Mr. Chastanet,
Yes, sir.
during your stint in government and during the campaign, you spoke quite a lot about the ferry travel to the islands, right?
Yes, sir.
What has happened to that? I mean, do you have to be in government to make sure at least you get certain things done? Or were you using this just to at least win the election? I mean, we really need another form of travel. And the way you spoke, if you had won, we would have gotten it tomorrow. So, is that still in the pipeline? And
Well,
are you still going to do something to make sure we get another form of travel?
All right, thank you very much. Let me have Mr. Chastanet respond very quickly because we're almost out of time. We just have a few more seconds left.
The ferry service is something I strongly believe in. I think because the ferry service achieves two things. One, I think in terms of bringing the region closer together from a commercial sense, it starts making it happen because you can carry cargo and you can carry people. And it becomes a cheaper form of transportation. And there's still a lot of people who don't want to fly on a plane. Okay? The issue at hand was that Trinidad was appointed the chair of the committee. And we kept on trying to make sure that Trinidad was having the meetings. And the reason why Trinidad was selected is because they have a great ferry service between Tobago and Trinidad. And that's the kind of ferry service that we wanted to see extended. I'm still hopeful that that's going to happen. But right now, as a government, and certainly as an individual, I don't have the resources, and the government didn't have the resources to invest in a ferry service by itself. We've had several discussions with the Express, the Eel, in terms of getting them to expand. And the people have been reluctant to go past the routings that they have now, which is St. Lucia, Martinique, Dominica, and Guadeloupe. We were trying to get them to at least go to St. Vincent and possibly even to Grenada, because we think that that would be a huge help in terms of moving forward. So I, like you, absolutely believe that a ferry service is needed. I'm really hoping the CARICOM has done a study, the Canadian government has done a study, and I'm hoping something eventually will come out of it. But it's a huge investment, and I certainly would continue to do in my private capacity to support it in any way I possibly can.
Alan, I mean, so much to talk about, so little time, and hopefully in the new year we can sit down again and have, you know, a similar discussion, raise some other points, because I'm sure there's, well, there are so many other issues that, you know, I'd love to discuss with you as far as government, tourism, you know, air travel is concerned, but then we only have 90 minutes here on Newsmaker Live. So it was a pleasure to have you, and feel free to drop by anytime, you know, and let's continue, let's keep those channels open.
Thank you very much. And just in my parting words, what I'd like to say is that I think the Minister of Tourism needs to spend maybe a little bit less time focusing on Alan Chastanet. He's been in office now for 1 year. He needs to show us what the plan is and to be able to deliver on that plan. At the end of the day, it's about the numbers. What are you going to do? And right now, we're going to have a disastrous tourism year. And I think that 2013 is priming up to be even worse than it was, simply because of the airlift situation and the strategy we have. So I'd like to encourage him to take the great words of Bill Clinton, who said, "It's about the economy, stupid." That's what it's about.
Carville.
And Clinton.
Well, that's it on Newsmaker Live. This is it for the year. Thank you very much for being part of the program for the past year. We really appreciate your calls, your support, and also you viewing the program to make it what it is. Just a program note, there'll be no Dollar Live tomorrow, but next week, Delia Dollar will have a grand Christmas party right here at DBS with Hilary LaForce, Mimi Fox, Jonathan Bruce, Shane Ross, Rob Zai Taylor, surprise guests, and many, many giveaways next week on Dollar Factor Live. Our last Press Club program is this Saturday, so join me then. Until that time, I'm Clinton Reynolds. Do have a wonderful holiday season.